Rome called them pirates, savages, a pest buzzing on the edge of their world, a nuisance to be swatted and forgotten. They had no idea they were looking at the future. They couldn't possibly know that the descendants of these sea raiders would one day wear the imperial purple, command the legions, and save the Roman Empire from complete and total annihilation. This is the story of the greatest irony in ancient history, the story of how the people Rome tried to crush ended up conquering their conquerors from within. This is the story of the Illyrians. Before it was a Roman province, it was a coastline, a maze of islands, inlets, and treacherous shores stretching along the Adriatic Sea. This was Illyria. It wasn't a single unified kingdom in the way we think of one today. It was a patchwork of fierce, independent tribes, each with its own king, its own customs, and its own thirst for plunder and prestige. The Dalmatae, the Ardii, the Liburni, names that meant little to the Senate in Rome, but everything to the sailors who had to navigate their waters. Their life was hard, carved from the rock and the sea. They were farmers, miners, and warriors, but above all, they were sailors. The sea was their highway, their hunting ground, and their fortress.
And they had the perfect tool for the job, the lembus. It wasn't a ship of the line, designed for massive naval battles. It was a predator. A long, narrow, and frighteningly fast galley, powered by as many as 50 oarsmen. With a shallow draft, it could hide in coves where larger Roman warships couldn't follow. It could strike without warning, overwhelming a fat merchant vessel before its crew even knew what was happening. To the Illyrians, this was a way of life. To the growing number of Italian traders trying to do business in the East, it was a nightmare. And Rome was starting to get an awful lot of complaints.
The complaints landed at the feet of the Ardean kingdom, the most powerful of the Illyrian tribes. Their king, Agron, had built a formidable power, but after his sudden death, rule passed to his wife, Queen Teuta, acting as regent for her young stepson. Teuta had all of her late husband's ambition and none of his caution. When Roman envoys arrived at her court demanding she put a stop to the piracy, they did so with typical Roman arrogance. They didn't see a queen of a sovereign people. They saw a barbarian woman they could intimidate. They were wrong. Teuta told them plainly that it was not the custom of Illyrian kings to forbid their subjects from taking prizes at sea. It was a private enterprise, she claimed, not a state-sponsored act. One of the envoys, filled with Roman pride and indignation, lost his temper. He told her that Rome would make it its business to force a change in Illyrian customs. It was a threat, a blatant insult to her authority in her own court. The ancient historian Polybius tells us Teuta listened to this outburst with womanish passion and unreasoning anger. But perhaps it wasn't unreasoning at all. Perhaps it was the calculated fury of a ruler who would not be bullied. The line had been drawn. As the envoys sailed for home, convinced they had put a barbarian in her place, they were ambushed. One of the brothers was killed, the other escaped to tell the tale. In Rome, the news of a murdered envoy was a cause for war. An attack on an ambassador was an attack on the Republic itself. The Senate didn't hesitate. They assembled a fleet of 200 warships and an army of over 20,000 men. This wasn't a punitive expedition, it was an invasion. Their target, Queen Teuta's kingdom. Teuta, for her part, had been busy. She had launched a major naval expedition south, besieging key Greek cities. She was acting like a major Hellenistic power, completely underestimating the storm that was about to break over her head. The Romans were not just strong, they were smart. The commander of the expedition, Gnaeus Fulvius Centimallus, didn't sail straight into a fight. He sailed to the island of Corcyra, which was being held for Teuta by a man named Demetrius of Pharos. Demetrius was an ambitious and treacherous man. Seeing the size of the Roman fleet and sensing which way the wind was blowing, he cut a deal. He surrendered the island and his garrison to the Romans without a fight. In exchange for his treachery, Rome made him their client ruler over a stretch of the Illyrian coast. The war had barely begun, and Teuta's kingdom was already being carved up. With Demetrius as their guide, the Romans swept up the coast. They relieved the cities Teuta was besieging and systematically defeated her forces. The Illyrians were brave warriors, but they were no match for the organized legions of Rome on land. Their fleet, designed for raiding, couldn't stand up to the Roman navy in a pitched battle. The war was swift and brutal. Teuta was forced to retreat to her last stronghold, the city of Rhizon. By 228 BC, she had no choice but to sue for peace. The terms were humiliating. She had to pay a massive tribute, abandon all her conquests, and most critically, her warships were forbidden to sail south of the city of Lissus with more than 2 unarmed vessels. Rome had won. They had punished the pirate queen and established their first real foothold on the eastern side of the Adriatic. They now had a buffer zone and a client ruler, the traitor Demetrius, to keep the other Illyrians in check. But Rome didn't want to occupy the territory. They took their legions and their fleet home, believing the problem was solved. They had taught the barbarians a lesson. But all they had really done was sow the seeds of future conflict and create a new, ambitious enemy in the very man they had just empowered. The next century and a half was a story of slow, grinding conquest. Demetrius predictably betrayed the Romans, sparking a second Illyrian war, which Rome also won. There were more wars, more rebellions. Each time Rome pushed deeper, each time more Illyrian land was absorbed. It was a brutal, bloody process. This wasn't the glorious warfare of legion against legion. It was grueling counterinsurgency in unforgiving terrain. The Romans called it pacification. For the Illyrians, it was a long, painful death of their independence. By the time of Julius Caesar, the entire region was organized into the Roman province of Illyricum. But the Illyrians were not broken. In the year 6 AD, while the future Emperor Tiberius was preparing to launch a major campaign against German tribes, Illyricum exploded behind him. It started with a mutiny of local auxiliary troops and spread like wildfire. This was the Great Illyrian Revolt, or Bellum Battonium. It was a cataclysm. Hundreds of thousands of warriors rose up, united under 2 leaders both named Bato. They slaughtered Roman civilians, wiped out isolated garrisons, and threatened to march on Italy itself. The historian Suetonius called it the most serious conflict Rome had faced since the Punic Wars against Hannibal. In Rome, there was panic. Augustus was terrified. He levied new taxes, recalled veterans to service, and even bought slaves to be freed and conscripted into the army. He gave command to Tiberius, who rushed south to contain the disaster. What followed was 3 years of the most brutal warfare imaginable. Tiberius avoided pitched battles, instead pursuing a scorched earth policy. He burned villages, destroyed crops, and systematically starved the rebels into submission. It was a war of attrition, fought in dense forests and fortified hilltops. It was a war of extermination. By the year 9 AD, the revolt was crushed. The Illyrian lands were devastated. But a strange transformation began to occur. The Romans had recognized the incredible fighting quality of the Illyrian people.
They were tough, resilient, and born warriors. With their independence gone and their lands ravaged, the Roman army became one of the only paths to a future for young Illyrian men. They began to enlist in huge numbers, not just as auxiliaries, but as legionaries. Over the next 2 centuries, the conquered became the foundation of the army. The province of Illyricum became the single most important recruiting ground for the entire Roman military.
Now fast forward 200 years, the Roman Empire is dying. The period from 235 to 284 AD is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. It's a perfect storm of chaos. The empire is ripped apart by constant civil war, with generals murdering emperors and declaring themselves the new ruler, only to be murdered in turn. The frontiers have collapsed. Goths, Alemanni, and Franks raid deep into Roman territory. A breakaway Gallic empire forms in the west. In the east, the powerful Palmyrene Empire under Queen Zenobia seizes control of Egypt and the Levant. Add in a devastating plague and hyperinflation, and the Roman world seems on the verge of total collapse. In this chaos, the old Roman aristocracy is useless. The senators in Rome are powerless. Power now belongs to the army, and the army belongs to the Illyrians. The legions stationed on the brutal Danube frontier, constantly fighting barbarians, are the toughest soldiers in the world. And they are commanded by men like them, tough, no-nonsense career soldiers from Illyria and the surrounding Balkan provinces. These men have no famous family names. They are born in peasant villages and rise through the ranks on pure merit and ruthlessness. And they start to take the throne. The first of this new breed to truly make a difference was Claudius, later known as Claudius Gothicus. In 269 AD, he faced a barbarian invasion of unprecedented scale. A massive horde of Goths had crossed the Danube and were ravaging the Balkans. Claudius met them at the Battle of Nisus. It was a desperate make-or-break moment for the empire, and Claudius won. He utterly destroyed the Gothic army, killing tens of thousands and securing the Danube frontier for a generation. He died of the plague shortly after, but he had stopped the bleeding. He had shown that the empire could still be defended. And then came the whirlwind. Claudius's successor was another Illyrian cavalry commander named Aurelian. Born to a poor family in Sirmium, Aurelian was a man of boundless energy and iron will. In a reign of just 5 years, from 270 to 275, he would achieve the impossible. He looked at the shattered empire and decided he was going to put it back together. All of it. The Senate would later give him the title Restitutor Orbis, Restorer of the World. First, he had to secure the heartland. He defeated wave after wave of barbarians who had broken through the frontiers. He knew Rome itself was vulnerable, so he began the construction of the famous Aurelian walls that still stand today. Once the core was secure, he turned his attention to the breakaway Gallic Empire in the west. In 274 AD, at the Battle of Chalons, he faced the army of the Gallic Emperor Tetricus. The battle was a decisive victory for Aurelian. With one campaign, Gaul and Britain were restored to the Roman Empire. But he wasn't done. Without even pausing to celebrate, Aurelian marched his weary army to the opposite end of the world to confront Queen Zenobia and her Palmyrene Empire. This was no simple task. Zenobia was a brilliant ruler, and her empire controlled the vital grain supply from Egypt and the lucrative trade routes to the east. Aurelian's campaign was difficult, fought across deserts and against a determined enemy. But his military genius was undeniable. He defeated Zenobia's armies, captured her, and brought Palmyra back into the Roman fold.
In less than 5 years, a peasant's son from Illyria had reunified the entire Roman world.
Aurelian was assassinated by his own troops in 275, a victim of a forged document. But the pattern was set. The throne continued to pass to other battle-hardened Illyrian officers, men like Probus, who spent his entire reign tirelessly campaigning on every frontier, men like Carus and his sons. They were rough, often brutal men, but they were exactly what the empire needed. They were soldiers, not politicians, and they held the line. They were the bridge, the generation that stopped the final collapse and paved the way for the man who would not just save the empire, but completely rebuild it.
His name was Diocles, born in the Dalmatian city of Salona to a family of former slaves. He rose through the military ranks until, in 284 AD, he was proclaimed emperor by the army. He took the name Diocletian. And he was different. All the Illyrian emperors before him had been firefighters, rushing from one crisis to the next, trying to patch up a burning building. Diocletian understood that the building was rotten to its foundations. It couldn't be patched, it had to be demolished and rebuilt from the ground up. His most radical reform was the tetrarchy, the rule of 4. Diocletian realized the empire was simply too big, too complex, and facing too many threats for one man to rule alone. So he split it. He took a co-emperor, Maximian, another Illyrian officer, to rule the west, while he ruled the east. Then he appointed 2 junior emperors, or Caesars, one for each senior emperor, or Augustus. This team of 4 could be in multiple places at once, fighting on multiple fronts. It was also designed to solve the problem of succession. When a senior emperor retired or died, his junior would take his place, and a new junior would be appointed. It was a brilliant, radical idea to bring stability to a world that had known nothing but civil war. And the reforms didn't stop there. He massively reorganized the provinces, breaking large ones into smaller, more manageable units. He separated military and civil command so governors couldn't use their legions to start a civil war. He reformed the currency and tried to fight inflation with his famous edict on maximum prices. He expanded the army and professionalized the bureaucracy. In every aspect of Roman life, Diocletian imposed order and control. It was autocratic, it was top-down, and it created a much more authoritarian state than the one that had come before. But it worked. He ended the crisis of the 3rd century. And in all of this, something profound had shifted. The center of the Roman world was no longer Rome. The city of Rome was an afterthought. The Illyrian emperors rarely visited. They ruled from military headquarters closer to the frontiers, cities like Sirmium in Pannonia or Nicomedia in Asia Minor. All the money, all the soldiers, all the imperial attention was now focused on the Balkans and the East. The West was becoming a backwater. The son of Illyrian slaves had fundamentally reoriented the empire, pulling its center of gravity eastward towards the very lands that were now providing its strength.
Diocletian did something no emperor had done before. He voluntarily retired. His tetrarchy, however, did not long survive him, collapsing into another round of civil wars. From that chaos emerged another towering figure from the Illyrian military establishment, Constantine the Great. Constantine would finish the transformation his predecessors had started. He would legalize Christianity, and in the most symbolic act of all, he would found a new Rome. A new Rome. He chose the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, strategically located on the Bosphorus Strait. He called it Constantinople. And so the circle was complete. The story that began with Roman envoys insulting a pirate queen on the savage shores of Illyria
ended with the Roman Empire being ruled from a new capital, a stone's throw from those very same lands. The people Rome had conquered, subjugated, and enlisted had, over 3 centuries, become the masters of the Roman world. They didn't burn Rome to the ground. They saved it. They remade it in their own tough, pragmatic, and militaristic image. The pirates and barbarians became the shepherds and emperors. In the ultimate historical irony, the conquered had conquered their conquerors, not with swords and fire, but by becoming more Roman than the Romans themselves.
The story of the Illyrian emperors is one of the most overlooked chapters in Roman history. What other forgotten groups played a pivotal role in the ancient world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories of the underdogs of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the past. Thank you for watching.